My name is Carolyn. I'm 69 years old, and sometimes I wonder if age makes us wiser, or just more attentive to the whispers that the world tries to hide. I remember as if it were today, the day I heard something strange about my own son, Nathan, a short phrase, said by a stranger in the market, which stuck in my skin like a shiver that does not go away. Tell me, what would you do if someone insinuated that the person you love the most is living a life you don't know? The truth is that when something doesn't make sense, our hearts notice it before our heads. We've all felt that twinge of doubt, that strange feeling that something is out of place, no matter how hard we try to ignore it. At that moment, there among shelves and carts passing by, I understood this feeling better than ever. It was as if the world had stopped just to force me to listen. And today, I'm going to open my heart to tell you exactly what happened after that whisper. I'll show you what I discovered when I decided to observe in silence, and how this decision changed everything in my life and in my son's life, because sometimes the truth comes quietly, but it knocks down like thunder. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. I have never been a woman to invade anyone's life. I always respected my son's space, even when he left, even when visits became shorter and calls for help more frequent. But that day, in that parking lot in Charlotte, something in me broke. From where I stood behind a dumpster, I saw with my own eyes what no one told me. A luxury car, bags of expensive brands, a laugh that didn't match the story they told me, and on Emily's face, an expression that was not of those in need. It was from those who hid it. I didn't yell. I didn't confront it. I just closed my hand on my chest and knew, either I watched everything in silence, or I would become an accomplice in a lie. And before continuing, if you are here with me, listening to this story with an open heart, I ask, accompany me. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, not as someone who presses a button, but as someone who holds my hand to cross this memory with me. Sometimes, we just need someone who listens, because telling this story hurts, and I can only do it if you're here with me, from beginning to end. My life, for the past few years, has been a thread of silence sewn together with small habits. I live in a modest apartment here in Asheville, on a quiet street surrounded by old trees that seem to understand me. Since Arthur, my husband, left, it will be 11 years ago, time has passed differently, no longer jumping, like when you have small children, but dragged, and sometimes cold. Every morning, I prepare my coffee slowly, wipe the porch with a damp cloth, take care of my succulents, and spend some time looking at the sky. It's the same sky I saw when Nathan was born, when Arthur got sick, when I carried my grandson in my arms for the first time. But today, he seems more distant. My routine is simple. On Tuesdays, I go to the nearby Methodist church to crochet with other ladies. We talk little, laugh little, but share a silent peace that only those who have lost a lot can understand. On Wednesdays, I walk to Main Street, stop by the grocery store, talk for 2 minutes with the usual clerk, and come back. On Saturdays, I read my books with worn covers. Sometimes I turn on the radio. Other times I just hear the sound of nothing. There are days when the silence inside makes more noise than any siren outside. Nathan, my son, is my only one. He grew up healthy, educated, sensitive, thank God. I tried so hard. There were so many nights sewing out, so many extra shifts at the hospital just to ensure his studies. I never missed anything. And even after I got married, I continued to help. He sent what he could, sometimes a little more. He said that they were going through difficulties, that Emily was out of work, that the rent was tight. I was in charge. And when he couldn't send it, he stopped buying meat for me and sent it anyway. Because Mother, when she loves, gets money even where she doesn't have. But over time, the connections changed. Before, he called me on Sundays, calmly, with time. Then, it became just a quick message. "Hi, Mom. Everything is fine here." And I answered, "Here too, son." Sometimes it took him 2 days to visualize. Others, he did not answer. I thought it was a phase, that it was the rush, that he had married, had a family to take care of. I didn't want to think badly. He didn't want to charge. I've always been told that a mother who demands too much loses the affection of her children. So I waited. I continued to send the gifts in the mail, cookies, crochets, 1 or 2 souvenirs from the city, and kept my silences in a little box inside me. but silence weighs differently when we have already been the center of someone's life. I remember when he was a boy, and I would leave his bedroom door ajar just to hear if he was breathing. I remember the day he got sick and I slept sitting next to the bed holding his hand. I remember my adolescence, when he started going out at night, and I only went to bed after I heard the key turn in the lock. And today I only hear the sound of the refrigerator. Moment of reflection, plus comment CTA. It's funny how life goes around, isn't it? We give everything, without expecting anything. And yet she misses being remembered. Of hearing a, "Mom, are you okay?" It's not for the present. It's not for the help. It's by gesture, by memory. I know there are a lot of people who feel the same. If this piece of my story has touched you in any way, comment below with an "I understand" or "I've lived it." Sometimes knowing that we are not alone is what sustains us on our feet. And it was in this scenario of calm and absence that whisper in the market reached me, like an icy wind blowing through the skin on a hot day. A phrase said carefully, but which entered my soul as a warning. At first I ignored it. I refused to believe it. They must be confusing. Nathan is good. He wouldn't do that. But something in my chest didn't settle down. And so I decided I needed to see it with my own eyes. Because if there was something wrong, I was going to find out. And what I saw, there is no way to forget. That morning I just wanted to buy a cake. It was an ordinary Friday, clear skies, and I had decided to surprise my grandson. A simple muffin, with vanilla frosting, the kind that children like. I like to take these little things when I visit, even if it's not always well received. I entered Ingles Markets as I always do, greeted the guy from the bakery, picked up the cake carefully, and went to the cashier. I was distracted, wondering if Nathan would like the visit, if Emily would make that face of someone who didn't expect, or didn't want, to see me. That's when it happened. A man, already of a certain age, whom I had never seen, attended me at the cashier. He had sunken eyes, a serene expression. When I swiped my card and picked up the bag, he held my arm lightly, almost like someone holding a petal so it wouldn't wrinkle. And he asked, looking me straight in the eye, "Are you Nathan Dorsey's mother?" That gave me butterflies in my stomach. It was not common for someone to recognize me like that. Me, with my simple clothes, my hair up. I just nodded. And then he leaned over quietly and said, "If I were you, I'd pay more attention to his family. There's something wrong. Is that it?" Then he smiled and went back to work, as if nothing had been said. I left there with the cake in one hand and my legs wobbly. I sat on the bench outside the market to breathe. What did that mean? Who was he? Why did he talk that way? Was it someone jealous? Or maybe an acquaintance of Emily's? Or had he seen something that I, so busy believing, had missed? On the way home, I went over those words dozens of times. There's something wrong. But what? Nathan has always been a good boy. He always respected me, always thanked me for everything I did. Of course, after she got married, she changed a little. It became drier, more distant. But times change, don't they? We learn to accept it. Only now that sentence had planted a seed that was difficult to uproot. I spent the rest of the day in silence. I put the cake in the fridge, sat in the living room armchair, and stared at the street without seeing. The radio would play softly, but I would just hear that voice again and again. There's something wrong. That moved me in a strange way. It wasn't just what he said. That was the way he said it. No mockery, no gossip. It was as if he felt sorry for me. And then I thought, what does a person have to see to feel sorry for a mother? That night, I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I saw the hours pass on the ceiling one by one. I tried to push the idea away. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing. But something inside me had already changed. Because sometimes doubt comes in without asking permission. And once it enters, it does not leave. I didn't know what to do yet or where to start. But one thing I knew. That cake didn't go to Charlotte anymore. And I needed to see with my own eyes what they were hiding from me. The question was I ready to endure what I could discover? On Saturday morning, I put on my best blue dress, the one with little pearlescent buttons that Arthur always said suited my ways, and went to the corner bakery to buy a fresh apple pie. The girl at the counter complimented my handkerchief. I smiled, thanked her, and followed with the bag on my lap to the bus station. Charlotte is not far from Asheville, but the commute always gives me time to think. On that trip, I thought of the little Nathan, the first drawing he made for me, on a crumpled sheet, where he wrote, "Mommy, I love you," with purple crayons. I also thought about what the market man had said. That voice still echoed in my mind, as if it had been yesterday. When I got off in Charlotte, the wind was dry, and the sun burned lightly. I took a simple taxi to my son's house. I already knew the address, of course, but it had been more than a year since I had set foot there. When the door opened, it was Emily who answered. Her smile lasted half a second. He looked at me, at the pie, at the floor. "Hi, Carolyn. We didn't know it was coming," I replied calmly, as always. "I wanted to surprise you." She made room and let me in. And there, standing in the entrance hall, my chest tightened. The sofa was new, made of white leather. The TV, huge, almost the size of the wall. Carpets that looked like imports, modern paintings. Even the lamps had the air of a magazine. My heart was confused. That didn't match the calls for help I read on my cell phone. "Wow, what beautiful changes," I commented, trying not to look suspicious. Emily quickly replied, "Oh, promotions. We won some things too." I nodded. But my gaze was already running over the details. Nathan appeared soon after, coming down the stairs with a face of someone who didn't sleep properly. He hugged me, but it was quick. "Hi, Mom. Is that okay?" "Everything, son. What about you?" He deviated, said that the work was hard. Emily had already returned to the kitchen, and I stood there with the pie still in my hand. I kept watching. My grandson, who used to hug me running, now appeared reluctantly, gave a kiss on the forehead and went back to the video game. Emily hardly looked into my eyes. He spoke to me as someone who dispatches. I prepared my best smile. He said nothing. I just sat on the new couch, feeling like it was a stranger's house. We had something simple for lunch, which even relieved me. Emily said they were cutting spending, that they were in a difficult phase. I listened, chewed slowly, and looked around again. The living room table had a modern sculpture in the center, and what hurt me was not the incoherence. It was the distance. The way Nathan looked at me without seeing, as if my presence was a reminder of something he wanted to forget. After lunch, I asked if I could sleep there, so I wouldn't hit the road on the same day. Emily looked at Nathan. Nathan hesitated. "I think tomorrow we leave early. It's going to be difficult." I nodded, as if understanding. But inside me, a certainty began to form. Something was wrong, very wrong. And if they were lying to me, what else would they be hiding? I needed to figure it out, even if it hurt. Because sometimes what hurts the most is not the lie. It's the love we gave to those who chose to lie. That afternoon, after the salt-free lunch and the forced smiles, I offered to help with my grandson's clothes. Emily was washing dishes, Nathan was playing with his cell phone, and the boy had left some pieces thrown on the sofa. I thought it was a way to show myself useful, to remember who I was, the woman who spent her life washing school uniforms, sewing shirts, folding lavender-scented pajamas. I went to his room carefully, took the clothes, and went to look for the closet. When I opened the door, I was faced with a tangle of expensive bags, some still with the tags hanging down. Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, Whole Foods, children's clothing with brand seals. Some smell of novelty. Others, not even unfolded yet. I stood still for a few seconds, holding a simple t-shirt in one hand and looking at that luxury kept as if it were a secret. And it was then that I heard the door behind me. Emily walked in quickly. Her look startled for a second, before pulling the closet door back and smiling yellow. "Oh, it's just a few things I got from friends. You know, rich people who get rid of it early." I just nodded. I smiled back. I put his grandson's clothes in a drawer and left. My heart was pounding, not because of the lie, but because of the naturalness with which it was said, for the tranquility with which she looked me in the eyes and hid everything, as if I was nobody. Later, I sat in the living room with the pie I had taken still closed, waiting for someone to want a slice. Nobody wanted it. Nathan told me they were tired. Emily commented that the next day they would have an important appointment. And when I asked, almost in a whisper, if I could sleep there one more night, she answered me with an uncomfortable smile. "I think it's going to be hard, Carolyn." She didn't even say my name with affection, just that cutting tone, dressed in politeness. I got the message. I wasn't supposed to stay. I took took my bag, folded the handkerchief I had taken, thanked him like someone leaving any visit, and said goodbye to my grandson with a kiss on the forehead. He was too entertained to look at me. Nathan walked me to the door. He gave me a light hug. He didn't ask how I was going to get back to Asheville, or if I needed help with the bus. I just said, "Take care, Mom," and closed the door. I walked to the nearest point. The sun had already set, and the night wind was blowing down in the face as a warning. I sat on the cold bench, with the pie bag on my lap, and I felt a different pain. It was not sadness. It was a feeling that something had been ripped from me without warning, a bitter certainty. I was no longer welcome in that house. And worse, maybe it had been a while since it was. My heart, even calloused, still broke inside. But I needed to swallow it with the same dignity with which I swallowed so many other things in life. And before continuing, I wanted to say, I'm here opening my heart, telling this painful story that many people keep silent. If you are there listening, feeling along with me, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's not just for me. It's for so many voices like mine that no one hears anymore. Because this story will also show that a mother's silence is more powerful than any lie. And the truth, at some point, always finds a way to show itself. What was I still going to discover, unintentionally? The bus drove off slowly, leaving the streets of Charlotte behind, and I sat in the last seat, as I always do when I need to hide what I feel. I like that little corner. No one looks back. No one asks if everything is okay. I rested my forehead on the glass and let my eyes get lost on the road, but what I saw was not the landscape. It was the entire past unfolding, scene by scene, like a silent film. I saw Nathan Tiny, in a hand-sewn uniform, with the hem crooked because I still didn't know how to measure properly. I remembered the night I made a birthday cake with expired flour, because that was all I had in the pantry. He ate it with gusto, said it was delicious, and I pretended I didn't know the bitter taste it had for me. I remembered the medicines I didn't buy to send him $100 when he married Emily. "Just until things work out," he said. And I sent it, month after month, even with tight bills, even though I had to count coins at the pharmacy, all to see my son happy. But now I felt that something had been lost. It wasn't just the distancing, nor the veiled contempt of Emily. It was something deeper. As if that sweet boy I raised had been swept away by a mist I couldn't get through. I wonder what happened to him. What did they do with that very good heart that I helped to form? The tears flowed slowly, without sound, without fanfare. I cleaned myself with the cloth handkerchief that I always carry in my bag, the one embroidered with the letter A for Arthur. It made my chest tighten to remember him. Arthur would have known what to do. I would have knocked on Nathan's door, looked him in the eye, and told him the truth firmly. But I only knew how to be silent, to observe, to carry the weight in silence. The doubt that the man in the market planted now turned into pain, a pain that came from the bottom, one of those that cannot be explained to anyone. And even so, I still tried to find excuses for them. They must be going through a difficult time. Maybe Emily is insecure. Maybe Nathan is confused. I clung to these words, as if clinging to a thin branch on the edge of the abyss. But the truth was already there, whispering deep in my chest. And as the bus passed the "Welcome to Asheville" sign, I closed my eyes and knew my home was waiting for me the same way it always had. Quiet, honest, small. But something about me had changed. I would no longer be that mother blind in love. I needed to understand what was happening, because sometimes when we don't have answers, it's best to start looking for the right questions. And that's exactly what I did the next day. But I could never have imagined where those questions would lead me. When I got home that night after the bitter visit, everything seemed tighter. The sofa was already worn out. The plants on the balcony, the smell of the tea I had left in the mug. Everything gave me the feeling that I was trapped in a life where I gave too much and received too little. But I didn't cry again. Not that night. Instead, I took a deep breath and made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to accuse anyone or ask for explanations. I was just going to observe. Because when we scream, they close in. But when we are silent, they show who they are. The next day, without saying anything to anyone, I bought a new ticket. I used one of the prepaid cards I had saved in case of emergency and prepared to return to Charlotte. But this time, I wasn't going to knock on the door. This time, I was going to stay outside, 2 days later, I got off the bus with my brown leather bag, the one Arthur gave me on our last Christmas together, and headed straight down the street where my son lives. I asked the taxi to drop me off a block earlier. The driver, a young man, asked me if I wanted help with the bags. "No, thank you, my son. Today I go slowly," and I went. I carefully turned the corner, crossed the sidewalk, and hid behind a leafy tree that gave shade in front of a neighboring house. I waited there for about half an hour, my heart pounding in my chest as if I were 20 years old again. Then I saw the door open. Emily came out with quick steps, sunglasses, a tight dress that I had never seen before. He got into a shiny black car, one of those that don't match the talk of "we're tight." I never heard Nathan mention that car. I wrote down the sign on a small piece of paper and started to follow the distance. I took a taxi and asked him to drive slowly, without getting too close. She went to a market on the other side of the city. Not just anyone, but one of those sophisticated places where even the smell seems to be fake. I've never been to Whole Foods, but I recognized the facade of the ads. I stood outside, waiting. Emily left with 2 bags full, loaded with expensive things: imported cheeses, fine wines, fresh flowers, a package of meat that, just by looking at it, you could tell it cost twice as much as my entire market. My chest tightened. It wasn't jealousy, nor anger. It was a feeling that only those who have sacrificed their own well-being for the well-being of others understand. The feeling that I was deceived, that every dollar sent with love had become a hidden luxury, that the scarcity they told me was a well-staged staging, and it was there, from afar, watching that woman get into the car with her boutique bags, that I knew I was beginning to see the truth with my own eyes. And if you're following me here, hold my hand, because what's coming is even stronger. There are things that, when we find out, change everything inside. Because it's one thing to doubt, another is to see. I went back to the cheap hotel I booked under a false name, lay on my side, hugged my scarf, and stared at the wall. I didn't sleep all night, because if Emily could do that without Nathan knowing, what else did she hide? And worse, was my son part of it too? The next morning, I woke up early in the cramped room of the hotel. The head throbbed, and the stomach asked for coffee. But it was the heart that weighed the most. I put my things away calmly, adjusted my handkerchief in the mirror, and took a taxi again, to that same market where it all began. The same where days before, a man planted a doubt inside me that now had roots. I entered with slow steps, heart racing. I approached the cashier where he worked. The same gentleman, with a tired but sincere look. He recognized me right away. He smiled small. "You are back." I took a deep breath and just said, "I wanted to better understand what you meant that day." He looked around, checked that there was no one in line, and then discreetly took a folded piece of paper from his apron pocket. "I shouldn't be doing this, but you deserve to know. It was a receipt. It dates from 2 days ago. Name: Emily Dorsey. Total value: $487. Imported wines, prime meats, fruits that don't even have a name." I looked at each line as if it were a stab. And it wasn't the value itself. It was the lie he unmasked. The hypocrisy of those who ask for help while bathing life in luxury. I thanked him with a squeeze on his shoulder. I left the market with trembling legs. I walked the streets aimlessly, trying to organize my thoughts. I passed by a quiet square and sat on a bench under a tree. It was there that 2 ladies approached, talking loudly. When they saw me, they smiled sympathetically. "Are you Emily's aunt? That blonde girl married to Nathan who lives there on Oak Street?" I nodded, without correcting it. They laughed among themselves. "Wow, they live in a party there. Just the other day a new refrigerator arrived. And yesterday, more delivery. Beautiful furniture. That house is a parade." The other added, "They say that the mother-in-law still helps, poor thing. If it were me, I would have already cut everything." I stayed there, silent, hearing, bleeding inside, but smiling on the outside, as I always did. They went on their way, and I stayed. There, alone on that bench, I understood that the truth no longer needed to knock on my door. It had already entered, made its home. My son was being deceived, and I, used as the foundation of a lie. Moment of reflection. Plus, comment, CTA. It's hard to accept that someone we love can be manipulated like that. Even worse is realizing that you were an accomplice without even knowing it. A mother's love is blind, but pain opens our eyes, If you understand this feeling of having given everything and being deceived, write here in the comments, "I understand you," or "It's true." Sometimes we need to say it out loud so as not to get sick inside. That day, there on that bench, a part of me said goodbye to naivety, because now I had no doubt. And what would I do with this truth? It was what lay ahead. I just didn't know that, by following my instinct, I would catch something even more cruel, something that would change everything I thought about their lives, and about my own son. I returned to Asheville as someone returning from his own funeral. I got off the bus with slow steps, without hunger, without haste. I opened the door to my apartment, and the first thing I smelled was the smell of the tea I had left on the stove. Old, bitter, forgotten, like me. I put my things on the table, took off my shoes calmly, and went straight to the armchair near the window. It was there that I always sat to read, to pray, to remember. But that night, I just wanted to forget. The sky was clear, but inside me it was just a heavy cloud. I held the mug with both hands, cold tea, warm heart, and I stayed. The hours went by and I didn't move. I just thought. I thought of the little Nathan, the boy who hugged me tight and said he would take care of me when he grew up. I thought about the man he had become, and wondered, is it still him, or had Emily already transformed everything? Because what hurt me most was not money, nor ingratitude. It was the feeling that I had lost my son, while still calling him mine. I wanted so much to tell him everything I saw, show the receipts, the dates, the words of the neighbors. But would he believe it? Or would you say that I was making it up? That I was getting old, bitter, jealous? The fear of losing once and for all the little that was left of the two of us kept silent. For the first time, not out of prudence, but out of fear. Fear of not recognizing the tone of his voice. Fear of hearing a, "I don't want to see you anymore." So I decided to wait. I started to put everything together. I took a blue folder that I kept at the bottom of the drawer and started to organize the papers. The receipt from the market, the note of the license plate, the dates of deliveries. I wrote everything in an old notebook, one of those hardcover ones where I used to write down recipes. Now he wrote down truths that no one else seemed to want to hear. And as I wrote, something inside me changed. The pain did not subside, but it was taking shape. And with form came strength. Because what I discovered in these days, silence, when well cared for, becomes a strategy. And Mother, when she needs to, learns to outsmart the lie. But that morning I felt afraid. Real fear. His. From my son. Because I began to realize that he wasn't just being deceived. He was being molded by her. The words, the dry manner, the distant look. It was as if I was watching someone sculpt a new version of him, right before my eyes. And that version didn't recognize me anymore. That broke me. It destroyed me in silence. I didn't cry out loud. I didn't break anything. I just stayed there, writing, because it was all I could do. And it's curious. Sometimes, we spend our lives teaching our children not to lie. And when they grow up, they are the ones who lie more naturally than we ever imagined. The hardest thing was accepting that maybe, just maybe, my son hadn't just been Emily's victim. Maybe he already knew. Maybe I was letting it. And if that's it, who is he now? Who did I create? These questions didn't let me sleep. And it was there, sitting in the dark of the room, that I understood. A mother's pain doesn't make noise, but it can make history. And mine. It was just beginning. I just didn't imagine that the next discovery would make me doubt even what I believed to be true. The sun came through the cracks in the shutter with a cruel delicacy that morning. The light hit the old wooden floor, illuminating the little details of my apartment that I used to find beautiful. The flowery rug I got from my sister in 1972, the wall clock that stopped every Tuesday, the corner table where the picture frames were. But that morning, nothing seemed to smell the same color, the same sense. Something inside me had changed, and it wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper, a weight that didn't ask for crying. It called for action. I got up slowly, without hunger, without routine, without coffee. I went straight to the kitchen table where I had left the blue folder and the notebook. I opened everything as if opening a wound already known. There were the receipts, the folded papers, my notes. There was even the name of the neighbors who commented on the parties, the license plate. the date of the market, the exact words that the cashier had whispered. I looked at each item with the eyes of someone who no longer needed to believe, needed to understand. It was like putting together a puzzle with pieces of pain, and as I fit in, page by page, test by test, I felt a new strength being born. It wasn't anger. It was not a desire for revenge. It was love, a tired, wounded, but firm love. A love that this time was not going to be silent. I understood then that my role as a mother was no longer to protect Nathan from pain. It was to protect him from the lie. Even if for that he had to hate me for a while. Even if he screamed, doubted, pushed me away. I was prepared. Why not act? Not observing, not to intervene. That would be abandonment. And I never abandoned my son, not even when I was left outside. I spent that whole day sitting, putting together the chronology of the facts, from the first request for financial aid to the day I saw Emily leaving with luxury bags. I created an order. I numbered it. I photographed the papers with the old cell phone that I almost don't know how to handle, but I learned by force. I wrote everything down in clear letters, so there was no doubt. And I started to think, what to do with it, how to get there, how to show that it was not an attack, it was help. I still didn't have the answer, but now at least, he had the way. I felt a different peace that night, like someone who finally decides to stop hiding from their own truth. I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I stood there, staring at the ceiling and saying under my breath, "You're not going to destroy my son, Emily. You can hate me, you can call me a nosy old woman, but I won't allow it." And it's curious how, sometimes, the silence that comes after pain is more powerful than any scream. It was at that time that I thought of you, who are there listening to my story with this open heart. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes, all a story needs to make sense is someone willing to listen to the end. And I swear to you, the end has not yet come, because when I thought I had seen it all, I received a message that completely changed the course of what I thought I was doing. The following week, I woke up with a single thought in my head. I needed someone who could see what was happening through the eyes of the law. I was good with sweet words, with notebooks, with memories, but what they were doing to me, and to Nathan, had already crossed any family boundaries. It was abuse, a robbery dressed in affection. I grabbed my cardigan, hailed a cab, and drove to downtown Asheville. On the third floor of an old building on Lexington Avenue, I walked into a modest office smelling of old paper and freshly brewed coffee. On the door, a sign read, "Randall Harper, Family and Social Security Law." He was a gentleman with white hair and glasses hanging from the tip of his nose. He looked at me with kindness, as if he had heard many stories that do not fit in a lawsuit, but fit in the heart. When I finished telling him everything, he was silent for a few seconds, then calmly said, "Ms. Carolyn, what you're describing to me is a kind of emotional financial exploitation. It happens more than it should, and almost always, with mothers like you." I felt the ground come off my feet a little, but I stood firm. He guided me on everything I should gather. Documented, clear evidence. It was not enough to have seen it. It was necessary to show it. Bank records, prints of old messages, proof of transfers, receipts that contradicted the requests for help. Every little detail matters, he said. I returned home with a full head, but decided. I took the old boxes out of the closet, where I kept letters from Arthur, bills paid with sacrifice, bank statements that I never had the courage to throw away. And there, in that mountain of paper, I found evidence of a story that had been written without me noticing. The first call for help, $100 to fix the car. The second, $50, because Emily had lost her job. Then came the rent arrears, the doctor's bills, the grandson's birthday present, all made with care. But now, with different eyes, I saw the pattern. It was always in her name, always coming from the same number, and always followed by promises that were never fulfilled. I spent days scouring every corner, even the old cell phone, which barely charges anymore. I kept conversations. I reviewed audios that hurt me. "Mom, can you send it just one more time? It's only until next week." And I did, because a mother doesn't ask when she sees her son asking for help. But now, every penny donated became a nail in the coffin of trust. Adding it all up, I saw that I had already sent almost $6,000 over 5 years. And here I am, cutting medicine, not going to the dentist, cooking with old pots. It was hard to look at all this. But at the same time, it gave me a new feeling, that perhaps my pain could be proven. Because it's one thing to suffer. It's another to be able to show that they made you suffer on purpose. And look, if you're still here with me, listening to every bit of this path, I ask you, stay a little longer. Because what I found out after that, that's going to mess with everything. I thought I was just dealing with a lie. But what came after showed me that, sometimes, behind the lie, there is something even uglier, convenience. And that's where the real poison lies. I spent an entire afternoon sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by papers, notebooks, printed messages, as if I were setting up an altar of my own pain, when I found something that made me freeze inside. It was an old conversation between me and Emily, months before the wedding. I had only kept it because I was learning how to use my cell phone at the time, and, unintentionally, I saved everything. In it, she said that her mother was very bad, that the rent was late, and that Nathan was desperate. I remember that week I had sent $100, even though I needed to buy my blood pressure medication. But as I cross-referenced that date with the records I had collected myself, I realized that on that very day, Emily had spent more than $300 on clothes in a store in Charlotte. It was no coincidence. It cannot have been. I felt as if someone had breathed a cold truth into my ear. I kept reviewing the conversations, one by one, and a pattern began to emerge, as clear as it was cruel. Each call for help was always accompanied by a last-minute tragedy. A pain, a bill, a remedy, a problem. But each tragedy also coincided with a superfluous purchase. It was a choreography, a script that repeated itself perfectly, and the more I read, the more a knot formed in my stomach, until I found an old handwritten note from Nathan, folded between some letters he sent me when I was still a student at community college. On the note, there was an underlined sentence. Emily says that helping her family is our moral duty, Mom. That word, duty, pierced me like a thin knife, because it was the same one that Arthur used when he asked me to save money, the same one that I taught Nathan since he was little, saying that responsibility was a serious thing. But there, in that note, it was not a lesson. It was a command. It was someone else using my son against me, shaping his morals the way he wanted. And what destroyed me the most was realizing that this note was from before the wedding. That is, she had been planting this idea in his head long before she officially joined the family. It gave me such a strong grip on my chest that I had to lean against the wall. I stood there, feeling the cold wood on my back, remembering when I saw the two of them together for the first time. She smiled at me that day, holding Nathan's hand, and I, foolish, thought there was sweetness there. But now, looking at everything scattered on the floor, I realized that maybe, from the beginning, I wasn't a mother-in-law. I was the opportunity. And I'll tell you something. Certain memories, when they come back, hurt as if they happened yesterday. We think we forgot, but they are stored in a corner of the chest, waiting for the time to wake up. If you've been listening to me have ever felt this strange ability of the past to come back with force, share it here in the comments. Say, I've been through this, or tell me some memory that still marks you. Because sometimes, sharing a memory is the only way it won't swallow us up on its own. I kept reading, investigating, cross-referencing dates, and that's when I realized something even more disturbing. The manipulation was not random. She was meticulous, calm, almost affectionate. Emily knew exactly when to ask, how much to ask, and how to justify. And worse, I knew exactly when my son would be most emotionally fragile. I felt betrayed, of course, but I also felt sorry for him. A deep, heavy pity that no mother should feel for her own adult child. There, kneeling on the carpet, my hands trembling and my heart clenching, I realized that I was facing something bigger than a greedy daughter-in-law. I was faced with a lie built in layers so well placed that even I, who gave birth and raised Nathan, couldn't see it in time. And as I closed the notebook and put everything in the blue folder, a question began to throb inside me. Silent, hot, anguished. If all this was able to escape my gaze, what else had I not yet discovered? Because deep down I knew there was one last missing piece of this puzzle. And this piece, it It was much closer to my son than I wanted to imagine. I returned to Charlotte on one of those days when the sky seems to hold its breath before it rains. I took with me only my purse, my coat, and the blue briefcase where I had kept every proof, every date, every word that hurt me. I didn't warn Nathan. I didn't want a mixture of voices, ready-made excuses, or rehearsed stories. I needed to look Emily in the eye. I needed to see how she would react when the truth was put on the table. Not as an accusation, but as a question. Question is a much more powerful weapon than shouting. Question disarms. Question exposes. I arrived at their door just before 9 in the morning. I rang the bell calmly, without haste. When Emily opened it, I saw in her eyes the same expression you see when someone finds something they had hidden badly. Surprise and fear. But she tried to disguise it, of course. Carolyn, what a surprise. And I smiled. Not that distressed smile I used to give, but a firm, calm smile, as if you already know exactly what you came to do. I joined when she made room. The room was like the last time, impeccable, decorated with luxury that doesn't go well with overdue bills. I sat slowly on the white couch, put the briefcase next to it, and waited for it to settle down. She didn't sit down. He stood with his arms crossed, as if trying to appear bigger than he is. Emily, I began in a low, almost gentle voice. I wanted to understand something. She lifted her chin. What exactly? I opened the folder calmly. I took out a folded piece of paper, the receipt from the market. I placed it on the top of the coffee table. The white paper cut through the air like a blade. You told me more than once that you were behind on rent, who were in need. She opened her mouth to answer, but I raised my hand slightly, asking for silence. So, daughter, how do you spend almost $500 on wine, imported cheese, and premium meat? On the same day you asked me for money to pay an electricity bill. For a moment, just one, I saw in her eyes the naked truth. She knew I had found out. Then came the short, nervous, rehearsed laugh. Oh, that. This has an explanation. Someone gave things away. It was a friend. I think you're getting it wrong. Maybe, I replied, still calm. That's why I'm asking. The word asking made her retreat, because those who are lying fear the question more than the answer. She tried to compose herself. Carolyn, you shouldn't be doing this. Nathan would be very upset if he knew he came here to investigate me. I'm not investigating anyone, I said, with the same softness that one uses to fold an old towel. I just want to understand why the life you show my son is so different from the life you show the world. She was speechless, and this silence weighed more than any accusation. Emily, I continued, leaning forward. I saw the expensive bags in the closet. I saw the new car. I saw you entering the luxury stores. Can you explain it to me, daughter? It doesn't mean anything, she replied, now shaking a little. You're drawing the wrong conclusions. Then help me get the right ones, I said. Tell me what's really going on. The room became too small for so many accumulated lies. She took a deep breath, looked away, walked to the side as if trying to find air, but he didn't find it. Because the truth, when it arrives, occupies all spaces. I don't owe satisfaction, she said, but the sentence came out weak. Yes, you should, I replied, with the calmness that only a wounded mother can have. Because it's not just about money. It's about Nathan. It's about what you're doing with it. It's about what you're doing with our family. She finally looked at me, and in that look I saw something that chilled me. Anger. Anger that I found out. Anger that I came back. Anger that I still exist in their lives. And it was at that time, exactly at that time, that I realized that this young woman never saw me as family. He saw me as a resource. She opened her mouth to answer, but I closed the folder slowly and got up first. Emily, think carefully about what you're going to say now, I murmured, because I haven't talked to Nathan yet, and whatever I say to him, it will depend on the truth you tell me. She turned pale, and I felt, for the first time, that her lie was about to crumble. But what I didn't expect, that's what would happen when Nathan found out I'd been there that morning. Because his reaction, that reaction would change everything. Not only the direction of the conversation, but the direction of our lives. She stood there looking at me as if holding a door with her foot, knowing that if I touch a little more, everything collapses. The silence was already too heavy, and I could feel the whole room breathing between the two of us. Then, suddenly, Emily changed her expression. The fake sweetness is gone. Fear, too. What came next was something I'd seen before in other people. That kind of aggression that masquerades as sincerity. She folded her arms, leaned forward and said in a low, firm voice, "You don't know what it's like to raise a real family, Carolyn. You don't know what it's like to have responsibility, to have bills to pay, to have people depending on you." I kept quiet. She continued, now with more venom. "You live alone, in your little life. But here we have a real problem. And you show up unannounced, mess with our things, want to know about our life. That bothers you. Bothers." That word entered me like a needle. Bothers. As if I were a burden, a noise, an obstacle. I took a deep breath. I'm not a woman to argue. I never was. And in that instant, I realized that nothing I said would change what she had already decided to think about me. So I did what I always did when life hurt me. I breathed slowly, let the pain flow inside, and kept my voice soft. "Emily, I didn't come to fight. I came to understand." She laughed, a short, nervous laugh. "There's nothing to understand. Who has to understand here is you. Life doesn't revolve around you." I just nodded in a slight nod, not for accepting, but for closing. Without haste, I opened the blue folder on the table. She looked at the documents as if she saw a bomb about to explode. I pushed the briefcase up to her, with my fingertips. "When Nathan asks," I said, my voice so low that it almost blended in with the air, "show him this. I'm not going to say anything beyond what I've seen." She took a step back, surprised by my calmness. Perhaps he expected screaming, scandal, accusation, but I never needed that. Truth, when it is complete, speaks to itself. I closed the folder with affection, as if closing a chapter. I got up slowly, sat my coat over my shoulders, adjusted the scarf on my collar. Emily didn't say anything. He did not try to prevent it. He did not try to explain himself. She just stood still, with her hands on the sides of her pants, her face tense, her breath short. I walked to the door in silence. The house was quiet, almost sad, as if she herself knew that something had broken there. Not an object, not a vase, but a bond. A promise that never existed. Before opening the door, I turned my face towards her. "I hope Nathan knows the truth when the time comes," I muttered. "That's all," and I left. The cold morning wind greeted me like a belated hug. I went down the steps without looking back, each step lighter than the last, as if I was giving back to that house everything it had already taken from me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for explanations. I just walked away. And in that gesture, so simple, something inside me also rose. The street was quiet, but the world seemed about to move in a different way. And as I walked to the bus stop, a question throbbed inside me, insistent, inevitable. How would Nathan react when he found out that I had been there, and that his wife had nowhere else to hide? I had barely turned the corner when I felt, deep in my chest, that something was going to happen in that house even before the sun went down. I know the silence of the guilty. I have learned all my life to recognize the noise that comes from within those who are afraid of the truth. And Emily must have been hearing that noise so loud she couldn't even sit still. Later, I learned exactly what happened after I closed the door. As soon as I was out of sight, she panicked. Not a pretty panic, one of those that seem fragile. No, it was the panic of those who see the ground open under their own feet. She started calling Nathan nonstop, 5, 10, 20 times. He left long, desperate, tearful messages, saying that I was confused, making up stories, messing where I shouldn't. She called her father, her sister, even a friend who barely speaks English. His despair was so great that he did not even realize that, with each version he invented, he said a different phrase. It contradicted the previous one. He changed details, exaggerating, decreased. I tried to fit into a version that made sense, but the truth is that those who lie too much lose their own embroidery thread. Nathan came home from work in the late afternoon, tired, sweaty, with his backpack hanging in a crooked way. This one I know well. It's his way when the day was heavy. When he entered, he found Emily sitting on the living room floor, crying in front of the blue folder I had left on the table. She got up like a gale, went up to him, hugging, pushing, accusing. She said that I was making things up because I was lonely, that I was jealous of their lives, that I wanted to control everything. But Nathan did not respond immediately. He just blinked a few times, trying to get the pieces in place. He asked for the folder. Emily said she didn't know where she was. He looked at the table and pointed. Over there. She tried to stop it. He threw himself in front. He took the briefcase with both hands. He said it was nothing. That I was confused, but her hand trembled. He asked again. He didn't scream. He did not threaten. He just repeated, "Give it to me." When she didn't give it, he walked away, went around the table and picked it up himself. Emily tried to snatch the briefcase from his hands, but this time he raised his arm. Not violently, but firmly. That's it. It dismantled it. Because for the first time, since they knew each other, he set a limit that didn't come from her. He opened the briefcase. And there were the dates, the receipts, printed messages, the photos of the car, the notes, everything I saw and that she tried to hide. Emily turned white, then red, then a mixture of the two. He began to speak loudly, fast, trampling over his own words. He said that I had manipulated everything. Then he said that I had misunderstood. Then he said it was envy. Then he said that he didn't even remember those purchases. With each sentence, he dug deeper into his own hole. And Nathan, he said nothing. I just watched. I imagine his pain at that moment, not because someone cheated him out of money, but because someone deceived his heart. And this wound, my God, this one has no ointment that heals quickly. Emily realized that she had lost control. He began to cry louder. He slammed the kitchen door. Then he came back. Then she tried to hug him. Then he tried to accuse again. But nothing stuck. Nothing made sense. Nothing stood still. Because when the truth comes, there is no lie that can disguise the smell of fear. And as she stood there, broken inside, not knowing where to run, Nathan held that briefcase as if holding a mirror. And perhaps, for the first time in a long time, he was seeing what was really going on around him. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So if you're here with me, listening to every bit of this story, enjoy this video and subscribe. Let's make this story reach those who need to remember that no one deserves to carry the pain hidden under the rug. And you know the most curious? Even with the truth stamped there in front of them, the hardest part was still missing. The part I never imagined would happen. When Nathan himself decided to look for me, and what he would say to me that day would change everything. I was in the kitchen, peeling an apple as I did every afternoon, when I heard 3 knocks on the door. Firm beats, but not aggressive. The kind of beat that only those who have known me since I was a boy would be able to give. My heart stopped for a moment. I slowly let go of the knife, took a deep breath, and walked to the door with short steps. When I opened, there he was. Nathan, my boy, with the face I've known since the first day I held him in my lap, but completely different. It seemed smaller. He looked younger and older at the same time, and it looked broken. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me with red eyes, as if he were fighting a wave that came from within. I didn't say anything either. I just reached out and touched his arm, and he fell apart. She disappeared into my arms as she did when she was 5 years old, and woke up from a nightmare. I cried inside, without letting out a single sound. I took him to the kitchen table, the same table where Arthur read the newspaper every morning. I sat him there, made him tea the same way I always did, and placed the cup in front of him. He held it with both hands, as if holding an anchor. The silence lasted for long seconds, until finally, he opened his mouth. His voice came trembling, almost childish. "Mom, I didn't know." The way he said that, it was not an excuse. It was not a justification. It was a confession. Then he collapsed. The tears fell as I hadn't seen in years, not since the day we buried Arthur. And I stood there, listening to every word as if holding his own heart so as not to break in two. I feel cheated, Mom. Humiliated. Used. I don't know how I didn't see, how I let it get to this point. I held his hand, so big, so strong, and at the same time so fragile there in front of me. "Son," I said quietly, "you've always been good, and that's why they used you." He cried harder, and I felt in that instant that everything I had kept silent for months finally found room to breathe. He began to count. He said that Emily always made subtle comments, putting doubts in his head about me, that she said I was dramatic, manipulative, needy, who made a scene whenever he suggested visiting me. that I fought for anything that involved my presence, my name, my voice. He said that she even controlled the time he should call me and how he should speak. She said you wanted to get me away from her, he confessed, looking at the cup as if it were a mirror from the past. And I believed it. I squeezed his hand tighter. I didn't judge. I didn't say, I told you so. I know what blind love does. I know how a person can be molded without realizing it. I know that intelligent wickedness always comes before us. We talked for hours. He told me. I listened. Sometimes he would stop and ask me, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" And I just replied, "Because you weren't ready to listen." And it's true. Some truths only find a place when the heart finally cracks. And on that day, his heart was in pieces. In the middle of the conversation, I looked at him, so vulnerable, so wounded, so mine, and I thought with all the strength of my chest, if you're here with me until now, listening to this story, it doesn't let go of my hand. The deepest moment is still coming, and I promise it's worth staying until the end, because love, the real one, always finds a way to return home. At the end of the afternoon, after everything was said, everything cried, everything exposed, Nathan took a deep breath and said with a new strength in his voice, "I'm going to get away from her, Mom. I need it. I deserve to breathe." That was not revenge. It was liberation. We stood there, in silence, looking at the same piece of table where so many memories lived, and I felt a peace that had not visited my chest for a long time. But as the sun began to set, Nathan stood up slowly and said, "Mom, there's one thing I need to show you." And I, at that moment, realized perhaps the truth had not yet finished speaking. What did my son carry in his pocket, or in his heart, that had yet to be revealed? Nathan stood for a while at the kitchen door frame, holding his own breath as if trying to gather courage before entering a dark room. When she finally spoke, her voice came out low, almost tired. "Mom, all this you discovered. It's not even half." He took out of his pocket a crumpled sheet, a printed document, and placed it on the table. I recognized the type of form on the spot: financial petitions, late collection, bank notifications. But it wasn't his. It was hers. And they were not small. Emily was deep in old debt, long before she met my son. Cards maxed out, loans denied, collection notices. It was like looking at a lifetime built on top of a hole. And for the first time, I understood why she stared at me with so much hatred. I was the living reminder that she hadn't been able to cheat fate, so she decided to cheat my son. In the following days, Nathan returned to Charlotte decided, not angry, clearly. He took the blue briefcase with him, the same one I had left on her desk, and confronted Emily calmly, without shouting, without giving any breaches. He told me later that when he put the briefcase in front of her, her face turned completely pale. She tried to do the same theater as always. Instant tears, hands and eyes, trembling voice. "You don't understand. I just did it for the two of us. Your mother persecutes me. She's jealous. She always had." But Nathan, my boy, now saw. Her words could no longer find a place to land. He didn't argue. He only showed the papers, the dates, the contradictions. Emily realized that she could no longer hide, and so she changed her strategy. Like someone who changes her mask in the middle of the play. She promised to change, asked for a new chance, tried to turn the lie into fragility. But what was broken, there was not the marriage. It was the trust. And confidence, once broken, does not stick with promise. The news spread quickly through their neighborhood. Charlotte has these things. The walls are thin, the sidewalks are talkative. In a short time, neighbors who had previously praised Emily's shopping, the parties, the new furniture, began to comment. I knew that wasn't normal. I always thought there was something wrong. Because it's like this. When the castle falls, everyone says they already imagined it. Her family has also moved away. The relatives, who lived at the parties and in the gifts, disappeared. Friends, who used to accompany her on luxurious purchases, preferred to pretend they never knew her. The truth, when it appears, does not forgive. It takes away not only what you have, but who you think you are. Without Nathan's money, without the forced affection, without the protection of well-told lies, Emily had to face her own life. A life that, without makeup, was made of late bills, bad choices, irresponsibility. And there, in that void where there had once been comfort financed by other hands, she finally felt the weight of what she had done. Nathan, for his part, made a difficult, but clean, decision. I was deceived for a long time, Mom, but I'm not going to live like this another day. He filed for separation. He went to the lawyer. He organized the papers. He stored his clothes in a small and simple apartment, but his own. Emily tried to reverse it, of course. He tried to meet him at work, waited at the parking lot door. He said he was sorry, that he would do everything differently, that I had poisoned his head. But when the person wakes up, when the heart finally opens its eyes, there is no theater that convinces again. And the more she tried to grab him, the further he moved away. Not out of hatred, but because of tiredness. A weariness I know all too well. The weariness of carrying someone who will never walk by your side, only on your shoulders. By the end of that month, their house no longer shone as it used to. The shopping is over. The parties are over. The expensive car disappeared from the garage. And life, that silent judge, took care of the rest. I didn't have to do anything. Truth has a habit of correcting what is crooked without raising its voice. But there was still a conversation that Nathan and I hadn't had, a conversation he needed to bring up, and I needed to listen. Something about what was really going on inside him during all those years. Something that, in a way, hurt more than anything Emily did. And that's exactly what he came to tell me. On the day he knocked on my door for the second time. When he knocked on my door that time, months after it all came to light, I recognized the sound of footsteps before he even said, "Mom, it's me." There are things a mother never forgets, even when the whole world tries to convince us that our presence no longer matters. I opened the door, and there was my son, not the tired, bent man Emily had molded, but the Nathan I thought I had lost. With a clean face, his eyes clear, his breath full, he entered without asking permission, as he had done when he was a teenager, and stood for a moment in the middle of the room, breathing in the smell of tea, old wood, and peace. "It's so nice to be here," he said. And this sentence was worth more than all the receipts, all the proofs, all the years that I carried alone the pain of being forgotten. Nathan told me that he had found a simple apartment in the South End, close to work. He said that, in the first weeks, it was strange to sleep without arguing, without having to explain his steps, without the weight of a guilt that was not his. But then, began to breathe better. He started cooking again. He went back to running in the park. He opened a separate account just to hold money, his money, for the first time in a long time. And he called me again every night, not because he needed something, but because he wanted to know how I was doing. It was as if we were rebuilding, piece by piece, the relationship that never ceased to exist, but that had been stifled by so much manipulation. He told me that he had never realized how Emily kept him isolated, how she kept him away from the people who loved him most. "She made me believe that you didn't like her, that I should choose a side," he confessed, with a sadness that gripped my soul. I listened to everything in silence, because sometimes the deepest love is the one that listens without interrupting. And when he finally took a deep breath and looked me in the eyes, I just said, "Son, you came back to yourself. That's what matters." And that's how, little by little, life began to move again. Not like before, because before it was no longer useful, but in a new, lighter, more honest way. I was also reborn a little. I went back to walking the streets of Asheville with less tired steps, resumed my crochet on Wednesday afternoons, participated in the reading group at the library, and even allowed myself to laugh out loud with new friends, something I thought was past my age, but it did not pass. It never passes. When we get rid of a weight that was not ours, the whole body relearns to exist. And look, I never wanted revenge. This I told myself every day. I just wanted my son back. Not for myself, but for himself. I wanted him to see the value he had always had, even when someone made him believe he was worthless. And when I finally managed to sleep a whole night without waking up with a heavy heart, I understood that justice did not come in the scream, nor in the fight. It arrived in silence, in time. In fact, sooner or later, it always finds the right path. Today, when Nathan comes to visit me on the weekends, he sits on my couch as if he were at home, because he is. He brings books, sometimes flowers, sometimes just his smile, and he tells me his plans, his new dreams, the small victories that only those who have been at rock bottom know how to value. He is in no hurry to find someone new. It is relearning to be whole first, and I, as a mother, am learning to rest, to live what is left of life without carrying the world on her back. But there was still something he hadn't told me, something he kept to himself for a long time, like someone who protects a piece of glass inside his pocket for fear of hurting his fingers. That evening, as the sun came through my living room window, he finally took a deep breath and said, "Mom, there's one thing you still need to know." And it was there, in that instant suspended in the air, that I realized the story I thought had ended. He still kept one more truth, a truth I never imagined I would hear. When Nathan took a deep breath that evening and told me that there was something I still needed to know, I felt my heart stop for a moment, as if time held its breath with me. He sat down in front of me, put his hands on the table, just like he did when he was a boy, before confessing to some mischief, and told me that in the weeks he was separating from Emily, he found old messages from her to her father, matching exactly what they would ask me for each month. "Let's talk about Light today. She always falls for it. Ask for the medicine again. Say he's worse. Say your mother is sick too. She helps without thinking." Cold, calibrated sentences, almost as if I were a machine from which they took coins. I listened to that without moving a muscle. And then he said, "Mom, the worst. It's just that I spent so much time believing in her that I came to doubt you." And it was at that moment that my heart broke and recomposed itself at the same time, because the pain hurt, but the truth healed. I held his face with my hands, which are already shaking a little, and replied, "Son, a mother's love is just like that. Hold on in silence, even when the silence cuts." He cried, and I let him cry, because tears also wash away what has become too heavy. The following months brought calm, almost like a rainy season that finally retreats. Emily and her family have moved on with their lives away from us. I don't know if they learned anything. I don't know if they reflected, but I know that their noise no longer reaches me. Nathan ended the divorce, reorganized his life, and today speaks to me with a lightness that I haven't seen since he was too young to realize the size of the world. His house is simple, but full of truth. And mine? Mine is back to being a place where I breathe whole. I walk through Asheville without feeling that weight hidden in my chest. I went back to taking care of my plants, resumed crocheting, and sometimes I sit in the late afternoon, looking at the armchair where Arthur sat to read the newspaper. I imagine he would be proud. Maybe he would say, with that small, assured smile, "You did what you needed to do, Lynn." And I believe I did. Not for me, but because protecting my son, even as an adult, even far away, has always been my role. Today, with almost 7 decades of life, I see that the great lesson of this story is simple, but profound. To love is not to annul oneself. To love is not to allow them to hurt us in silence. To love is to have the courage to open our eyes, to see what is crooked, to hold the hand of the one we created and guide him back when he is lost. To love is firmness with sweetness. It is knowing the time to be silent and the time to act. It's understanding that some truths save, even when they hurt in the beginning. And above all, to love is not to give up, even when life tries to say that it is already too late. It's never too late to rescue what matters. And before I finish this report, I need to thank you, who stayed here with me until the last thread of this story. Thank you for your company, for your listening, for your silent presence at my side. This heats up more than you might think. If this story touched your heart, leave a like. Because for me, it's like a tight hug, one of those that warm up even on cold days. And if you want to come back here for the next coffee, subscribe to the channel. It's like leaving the door ajar for me to welcome you again. Tell me in the comments where you are watching. I love imagining this piece of my life arriving in so many different cities, so many homes. And it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Now, don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.